Hello, welcome to 2023. So I filmed this video in the summer and obviously I never posted it because I'm back in January to continue it, but it's basically just was going to be all the books I read during the summer. I just decided to make it all the books I read in the year, except for like the first few months, but I didn't read anything. So we're gonna do a little time travel back to September for the first part of all of my books, and see you in the new year. Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read this summer and just giving a quick little rundown. I read 30 books this summer from the time I got home from school mid-June to now June. The first book I read was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. If I'm being honest, none of the books that I read this summer I like. Most of them I didn't love. Like, they were all good, but not really great. A lot of them were romance. I thought this book was really cute. I liked how it was like in the academia setting. I noticed in all romance books, they like to describe how big the guy is and how small the girl is. And they definitely did that in this book. But overall, I thought it was a cute book. And honestly, I would recommend this one. The next book that I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. And this was my least favorite of the Emily Henry books, but I gave it a 3 out of 5. I don't know. I don't think it was good. I don't think it was that memorable, but it was a good, like, quick romance, which at the time is exactly what I wanted to read. The next book that I read was Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and I liked this one a lot more, although they were kind of similar. I feel like it kind of had a similar storyline, but I gave this one 3.5 stars, and you could probably tell by this video, but I like to read, so I kind of liked how this was set and like publishing and like book related. I thought that was kind of fun, and I liked the characters in this one too. So overall, a good book. And the last book I read in June was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. I really liked this book. I thought it was kind of a fun idea, like teen girl solves a murder. It kind of gave me a break from the romance that I had been reading, but what I like about it was like fantasy, like fiction, but it kind of had a romance subplot, which is really what I like to read. And I also learned I kind of like reading a murder mystery, so this one I would definitely recommend reading, and it is part of a trilogy. Then we get into July, and the first book that I read of July was People We Meet on Vacation, and this was my favorite Emily Henry book. I really liked the alternating timelines. It goes between when they met in college to present day when they're going on another vacation together, and I liked seeing how like the kind of stories come together. I like reading alternate timelines, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5, so I would definitely recommend this one. It's probably one of the top romances that I read this summer. The next one that I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and I gave this one it looks like a little bit less than a 4.5 out of 5, but I really liked this one. I like kind of like the enemies to lovers and forced into a situation together, and I thought this one had a lot of funny moments. I'm not going to say it stood out in my books of the summer, kind of elevated it from romance because it had some funnier moments. The next one that I read was Heartstopper Volume 1, and I gave this one 5 stars. And I watched the TV show and I loved it. I thought it was so cute, so I'm like, I gotta read the graphic novels. And they do have their differences, but I think they were both, like, they adapted it to the screen really well. But I thought this was so cute, and it's a graphic novel, so it's really easy to read, and I would 100% recommend this book. It was so cute. The next book is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, and I gave this a 4 out of 5, but honestly it's probably less than that. I think, in my opinion, Colleen Hoover is a little overhyped. The one Colleen Hoover book, my favorite Colleen Hoover book was Verity, which I read at the beginning of this year, and that one was really good. But this one, Ugly Love, it was okay. There's like a lot of emotional trauma that they experience, and it's interesting to read about that, but I feel like the characters like weren't super likable. I don't really know. So that one was just okay. The next one that I read is One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I think I'm saying that right. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This one was also, it kind of gave like Breakfast Club vibes from the book cover, just the way they described all the characters. Oh, I realized I'm not even describing anything that the book is about. But I will start doing that now. Or these 5 students are all in detention together, and then one of them dies. So these 4 students are all kind of suspects in this murder investigation, and I may have guessed the ending. I felt a little proud of myself, but I really liked this book, and I really liked the characters and kind of how their like friendships and relationships develop throughout the story. So I thought this one was a really good book, and I would definitely recommend this one. The next one that I read was The Spanish Love Deception by, I only wrote the last name, Elena de Armas, something like that. And I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's about this girl who needs a date to her sister's wedding. So she invites this coworker that she does not like, and honestly this book kind of gave me the ick. I cringed in a bad way many times reading this book, and I feel like it honestly like went on too long for a romance. I feel like it needed to be a little shorter and quicker pace, so I would not really, I think there's definitely better romances in my opinion. The next book that I read was Loveless by Alice Oseman, and I gave this one like a 4.7 out of 5. I don't know. I didn't think it was a full 5.5, but what I really like about her books is kind of how they're about like finding friendships and like finding yourself and just like learning to accept yourself, I guess. And this one I really liked, but it's about this girl who goes into college and is like struggling with romantic connections, I guess, and it's just kind of about her like journey through college, and I thought it was really cute, and I really liked all the characters and how it's in a college setting, because that's definitely more of a relatable environment to me right now than like reading about high school romance, which I feel like I've outgrown, and like a lot of the ones I read are like 35-year-olds plus. It talks about their salt and pepper hair, and that's just a little too old for me. Definitely like the college vibe I really liked. The next book that I read was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I also liked how this one had alternating timelines, but it goes between them growing up in Malibu and then kind of their present, throwing like their big annual party. And I also I read a few more of her books and how kind of some of the characters like come into different books of hers, and I always like when that happens. I thought this one was really good. I recommend this one, honestly. Just a fun story. I think it did introduce too many characters that honestly irrelevant to the story, and it gave too much backstory on them, but other than that, definitely an enjoyable read. The next book I read was Love in Other Words by CHRISTINA Lauren, and I gave this one like a 3 out of 5. I did, as I've said, like the alternating timelines, and I liked like the childhood to lovers scenario, and I feel like the characters had some depth, but I don't know. I personally didn't really love it. I don't know what else to say. And this is kind of when I realized that I should stop taking TikTok book recommendations, because I'm really not loving any of them. Next I read One of Us is Next by Karen McManus, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5. It's the sequel to One of Us is Lying, and it's about the main character from One of Us is Lying. It's about her younger sister and kind of how another murder mystery affects their town through like a truth or dare game. And I liked this one a lot too. I think I liked the first one better just because I liked the characters more, but I thought they were both really good, and I liked kind of seeing how the characters from the first book like played a role in the second book, and I always like when that happens. So I would definitely recommend reading this duology. Big word. Alright, next I read finally I have one, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this book was so good. I gave it a 4 out of 5, which might be like a little low, but I really enjoyed this book. It is about an author who is writing the biography of Evelyn Hugo, and kind of each part of her life is defined by the husband that she is married at the time, and she just really wants the author to like get her true story and finally kind of be honest about what happened in her life. And I thought this was really interesting to see stardom and like what she had to do to become famous. And I thought it was really enjoyable and kind of a complex character that you don't always like, but like you want her to do well anyways. The next ones that I read, I also gave 5 stars just because I feel like I had to. They're so cute. But I read Heartstopper volumes 2, 3, and 4, and these are honestly so quick to read, but they're so cute, and they definitely get into some, like as the story goes on, some more difficult topics on like mental health and like eating disorders, and I feel like it approaches it in a really good way, still like kind of keeping the tone of the book light. The next book that I read was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I already read this book. I don't really know why I decided to read it again, but I really love this book. Definitely is very detailed at some points, but I really liked the storyline, like the characters. I really liked them all, and it's kind of like the enemies to lovers, and I really like that plot. So I think that book, it's like a really fun read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, like 4.2 out of 5 stars. The next book, as I will keep saying, is called Anatomy: A Love Story by Schwartz. I don't know the first name. This book was really cute, and I just found it at the library one day and decided to pick it up. There is a second one coming sometime soon, I think, but this book was about a girl, I think it was like 1800s Scotland, but this girl who wants to be a surgeon, and at the time women aren't allowed to become doctors. She dresses up like a man to be able to join the lectures and then accomplish her goal of being a surgeon. And it has a little bit of romance, a little bit of like fantasy, and I thought it was a really cute story. I'm kind of glad it caught my attention in the library. I thought it was a really good read, and I read it in like a day. So definitely a quick, fun read. Right, I'm going out to my new page of my notebook. Now we are into August. The first book that I read was The Born Identity by Robert Ludlum, and I think I gave this book like 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely the longest, or actually the second one was more challenging, but one of the longest, most challenging books I read, and so complex. I honestly don't even think I could describe it to you, but I'm gonna try. But it's about a man who has amnesia and basically forgets his entire past, and he just gets little snippets, and he's like, I know I need to do this, I know I need to do this, and he finds out he is an assassin and kind of like grapples with that, and it's just about him trying to find out who he really is with like basically everyone working against him. So I thought it was really interesting. It was like a thriller mystery, definitely different than every other book that I read this summer. So if you're looking for a more challenging, hard to understand, I literally read half the pages twice. It was very good. Next I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I did not like this book very much. I gave it like a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was just really weird. It was definitely an original book. I've not read a book like that, but it was weird, and I know she's supposed to be, but the characters are not very likable. The ending, it did not make sense to me, and I didn't really like it. And then my friend is reading it, and she pointed out that the main character, or like the narrator, doesn't even have a name, and I didn't even notice that. So it was a strange book. Do with that what you will. If you want to read it, have at it. The next book that I read was Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and it is the second book to the Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I liked this one a lot also. I don't think I liked it as much as the first one. I feel like it was a little sillier. That is not the right word, but I feel like it was a little less realistic, if I'm being honest, which I know they're not supposed to be. But basically, Pip, the main character, made a podcast about her first book. Then suddenly like another tragedy affects her town, and she investigates it again. I just feel like how it ends did not really make sense to me, but I still really liked it and definitely would recommend reading it. And then I read As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the third book, and this one was so good. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. This last one kind of gave me How to Get Away with Murder vibes. Yet another tragedy affects Pip, and this time it's like more targeted towards her. And this one also, it was really cool because it kind of has more like sciencey stuff about like forensic stuff, I guess, which was cool to read about. The next book that I read was Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, and I gave this one like a 4.3 to be precise out of 5. This one was also just about two friends who are kind of like their journey of their friendship, an anonymous podcaster that everyone is a big fan of, and then an anonymous artist who makes fan art about it. And he like reaches out and is like, hey, do you want to make some art for my podcast that he can use in it? And then they realize that they know each other in real life, and it's kind of about them, and once their identities are discovered, kind of like navigating that. And I thought it was a really cute story. Next I read The Alchemist. I guess one, honestly, I'm just gonna say 5 out of 5. It was so inspiring. It had a lot of like inspiring quotes about like life and just doing what you believe in, but it's about a shepherd who wants to travel the world. One day he learns about like what he's destined to do, and he's like, I need to pursue this, and kind of about like weighing, do I give up my life as a shepherd for something unknown, and kind of his journey. And then he meets a lot of different people who kind of help him keep on the right track to what he's meant to do. Alright, then we go into September, and the first book that I read was The Born Supremacy by Robert Ludlum, and it's the second Born Identity book. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I think it went on too long. It took me like 3 weeks, which I'm like is the longest that any book took me. This one I definitely was like, I just want to be done. It had a lot going on, like a lot, but basically Jason Bourne, the original, he finds out, or like someone is imitating him, and now there's 2 Jason Bournes, and they hire Jason Bourne original to try and kidnap Jason Bourne copycat. And this one had a lot of China/Hong Kong relations from like the 1970s, 80s, I think, with like People's Republic, and I just really don't know anything about that, so it was harder to understand kind of the reasoning behind why all this was happening. But I thought it was really interesting, and as the back of the book said, a killer of a thriller. Like, you could definitely read the first one as a standalone. The next book that I read was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee, and I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. And this one, I think my dad just got at the library and was like, this was good, I'll read it. It's about a group of Chinese and Chinese American students in college, and basically they're hired to steal Chinese art from different museums and basically bring the stolen art back to China where it belongs. And it was interesting to read about their experience and like how they connected to the art and like why it was important for them to do this. Next I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5. My first one of the summer, and it happened way at the end, but I loved this book. It was so good, and like I was captivated until the very end. This one also has kind of alternating timelines, but a young girl who lives on a marsh, and basically her entire family leaves her when she's like 7, and she has to learn how to survive on her own, and is kind of ostracized by the town because she's seen as weird. And it's about her kind of growing up alone. In the present time, the police trying to solve a murder of one of the local boys that died, and kind of how they tie together the two stories. So I would 100% recommend this book. It was so good and sad and heart-wrenching and captivating until the end. The last complete book that I read this summer was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I also gave this one a 5 out of 5. I thought this book was so good. I really liked the style that it was written in, because it was like an interview, I guess, so it had like the name and who was talking, and It's about a girl and her rise to stardom, Daisy Jones, and a band called The Six, and kind of how they, I've been saying this a lot, how their stories connect and how they come together, form a band, and kind of they become really famous. And it was really interesting to read about like their process of songwriting, kind of what they go through, the struggles of being in a band, and then it ends with like how the band ends up breaking up. Those were all the complete books. The book I'm reading right now is Solitaire by Alice Oseman. It's her first book that she wrote when she was like 17. It's about Tori Spring, who is the older sister of the characters in Heartstopper, and she is honestly very depressing, kind of sad and emotionless, I guess. But it's about her and just her life in high school. She meets like a new friend who's very exuberant, and they kind of become friends, and it's like, why would he want to be friends with me? So, once I got to school, I really didn't read anything. I only read one book. It took me September, October, November. It took me like the 2.5 months to read it, but it was the Song of Achilles, and I think I'd give this book like a 2.5, 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like it was very hyped, and everyone was like, it's so sad, and I mean, I guess it was. And I think the fact that I took so long to read it, I just never really got invested in it. It was about Patroclus, who's like sentenced to exile, and he meets Achilles, and then they like fight in a war together. I read these ones in Thanksgiving break in November, but the first book I read was Stellar Loon, which is book 10 of the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I've been reading these books for a really long time, so I feel like I would give this book like a 4 out of 5, just because I'm like very invested in the entire storyline. I feel like the recent ones, they've been very slow. It's like 700 pages, and I feel like nothing is really happening, but this one just like continues their battle against the evil forces. And I read I'm Glad My Mom Died, the Jeanette McCurdy biography. I thought that one was really good. Probably give it like a 4.5 out of 5. And it was just about her. There was like a part like before and after her mom died about like her acting, her struggles with like anxiety and like eating disorders and that kind of thing. And it was really interesting because I remember like watching iCarly. It's just seeing the behind the scenes, I guess, of like the acting and like her thoughts about it was really interesting. Okay, and then in December I read It Starts With Us, which is the sequel to It Ends With Us, which I thought was okay but very overhyped, and I kind of felt the same with this one. Like, it was good. Well, I like read the first one and I wanted to see how the story continued, and I like how it all wraps up. Like, I feel like it's a good ending, but it's just like not my favorite book. I'd probably give it like a 2.5, 3, I guess. The next book that I read was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and I'm like super late to these books, and I feel like these are like the books that I just would have totally loved when I was in middle school, because I was just really like the genre, like the YA fantasy that I liked, and I still like reading them now. I thought this book was really good, and like some of my friends at school liked it, and I was like, okay, I think it's time I read it. It's about an assassin who competes against other people to like be the king's champion, and she would like work for the king and like eventually win her freedom. It had like some twists that I wasn't expecting, and I'm reading the second one right now and I still think it's really good. The next book that I read was Lessons in Chemistry, and I also feel like this one is getting a lot of hype, and I thought the story was really good, but it's about a chemist who works in a chemistry lab, and then once she gets fired, she has her own cooking TV show, and she uses it to like explain chemistry while she's showing people how to cook. I guess it kind of like empowers women, because it's set in I think it was the 50s, but to like kind of do their own thing and like believe in their like that they're smart, I guess, enough to do these things. And so I thought the story was really good. I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5. I just thought the style it was written in was odd, because it has a lot of different points of views, but they're not always like clearly defined. Like sometimes it's like the dog talking, and I just thought that was a little bit weird, but like overall I think it was a good story and I enjoyed reading it. The last book that I read of the year was Carrie Soto Is Back. I actually thought this book was really good. I was like kind of on the edge of my seat, like gripping the pages during some of her tennis matches, because it's about, she's a very accomplished tennis player, like probably like one of the best, and she's won the most Grand Slams, and then someone ties her record, so she comes out of retirement and tries to like win it back, and it's about her competing in the 4 different slam tournaments, I guess. And I feel like I was like so invested in her accomplishing her goal on like her journey of doing that. And she's kind of like a hard character to like. Like I think it's interesting to see like from her point of view, like why she kind of has to act like that, just being such a public figure. But I feel like I was very invested in her storyline, and I would definitely recommend this book. I'd give it like a 4, not quite a 5, but like almost a 5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that wraps up all of the books that I read this year. I honestly don't know which one was my favorite of the whole year. Thank you for watching this video and all my other 2022 videos. Hopefully 2023 I can be more consistent, which I know I say all the time, so that probably won't happen. See you in my next video. Bye.